Thank you very much for coming along today. And our webinar today is focusing on strengthening communities through digital inclusion. And I'm absolutely delighted that we're joined by Evie Metcalfe from Virgin Media O2 Business and Beena Puri from GMCA, Greater Manchester Combined Authority. In just a moment, I'll ask them to introduce themselves, but I am Elizabeth Anderson, the Chief Executive of the Digital Poverty Alliance. For those of you who aren't familiar with our work, we are a charitable coalition bringing together industry, government and charities, in all cases, big and small, national and local, with the aim of ending digital poverty once and for all in the UK by 2030. And we do this through both advocacy and delivery. Evie, could I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Elizabeth. So hi, everyone. I'm Evie Metcalfe. I'm from Virgin Media O2 Business. I'm social value lead. And what that means is part of my role, I work really closely with our public sector customers to deliver social value and community benefits back to their communities.
Perfect. And Beena?
Hi, everyone. I'm Beena Puri. I'm Innovations and Partnership Lead at Greater Manchester Combined Authority. So a couple of hats that I wear. I'm part of the digital team that lead the strategy, the digital blueprint for the region. I also lead on the cyber ecosystem, which is one of our digital strengths here in the region. And I also lead the digital inclusion agenda, which is one of Andy Benham's 5 main priorities.
Thank you very much. And it's great to have so many people along here today watching this live. We'd love to know who you are. So do put in the chat what your name is, what your organisation is that you're representing, whereabouts in the UK you are. And as we go through, please do use the Q&A button, which is down at the bottom of the screen, if you've got some questions that you'd like to ask Evie and Beena as we go through that conversation. So I'm going to kick it off just by setting that scene a little bit in terms of what the digital divide looks like within the UK at the moment. And we did some research last year with Deloitte that actually found that in terms of people in the UK aged 16 or over, there's actually 13 to 19 million people who are experiencing a form of digital poverty at the moment. So what that tells us is that actually 1 in 7 people are experiencing digital poverty, 1 in 17 are experiencing the most severe digital poverty. So that's lack of access to devices, lack of access to connectivity, lack of access to skills, and some of the other key factors that sit alongside that. And around 82% of jobs in the UK now require core digital skills to actually be able to really deliver in that role. So finding employment is incredibly key, but it's also incredibly key for education, for accessing basic services, healthcare, even entertainment and building sort of social capacity. Evie, Beena, where do you sort of see this from where you sit inside industry and working in local government?
So I'm happy to take that first. So I guess from my perspective in social value as a tech provider, the point of social value is returning social economic benefits through our contracts. And so what's relevant in that space is to supporting access to tech. And a lot of the contracts I'm supporting, there's a big push, and I see this on contracts throughout the UK. It's not just segregated to one part of it, where there's digital exclusion is impacting all pockets of the UK. So we're trying to use our contracts and work together with public sector customers to do something about that. And the need it's far reaching. So it could be supporting pockets of, for example, more vulnerable groups, say those that are care leavers, for example. We see that there's a bigger focus there. So what we do with the contract is we'd set aside some budget or whatever that may look like to provide targeted support for that group in a local authorities area. So I guess from my perspective, I'm seeing it as there's clearly a need because local authorities are requesting that support through their contracts, and it's a really good way to do that and to get that targeted help. So yeah, that's kind of my perspective.
And I suppose if I can add that to that, so I'm speaking from a combined authority perspective, but we also link into other local authorities across the UK and other regional governments, because we recognise that digital exclusion is a global challenge, but it's up to us to be able to respond to that challenge, particularly around our areas. So just adding to your stats earlier, Elizabeth, so in Greater Manchester, as many as, so we're 2.8 million residents across 10 local authority areas. And in terms of what digital exclusion meant, and we recognise the national stats did not quite tell us the picture that we've seen on the ground during the pandemic. So looking at research from the Good Things Foundation and Liverpool University, it told us that up to 1.2 million residents in Greater Manchester face at least one barrier around digital inclusion. So really there is that's 41% of our population. So really there is a need to really focus around addressing those widening gaps. I'm part of the digital team. So our digital ambitions, we recognise our strengths here in the region. We're the biggest tech cluster outside of London. We've got some real strengths such as cyber within Greater Manchester, and that in itself is a cluster that's thriving. But we also recognise those widening divides, and each region across the UK has got its niche challenges. In Greater Manchester, for example, pre-pandemic, we had some of the highest levels of child poverty in the UK. We had some of the highest levels of unemployment in the UK. So in terms of what this means as a combined authority, digital inclusion, it is a basic human right. And we recognise that unless we address those widening divides, we are simply not going to address inequalities that existed pre-pandemic. We see connectivity as a basic utility. So while social value is part of what supports us to drive this agenda, this is also about how do we join up locally to make sure that our ambitions for the region considers the niche challenges of each of our boroughs. We also recognise, you know, the link into the economy, and we've seen that digital inclusion is a catalyst for economic growth. It means everything from access to healthcare, access to education and learning beyond the classroom, unemployment, digital skills within work. So actually, you know, digital exclusion or inclusion falls into every area of life. And we see this as we've got responsibility in terms of supporting residents and putting people at the heart of our regional strategy. So really this is about making sure that everyone, regardless of background, situation and age, can fully participate in life, work and business.
And absolutely, digital access is now about so much, and picking up on what you said there, Beena, it's an essential right now. It's an essential utility. It's impossible really to effectively live your life if you don't have the access to online tools. And that then also flows into digital skills. And we hear a lot these days from government in terms of some of the big shiny tech skills like AI and blockchain and coding. But actually, it's those everyday essential digital skills that are really going to make the difference to people, whether that's keyboard skills, whether it's how to do online banking, whether it's even just turning on your computer, connecting to Wi-Fi safely. What do you think, Beena, are some of the most important skills that you tend to see in Greater Manchester that are needing to be built?
So just looking at digital inclusion as a whole and what that means. So really for Greater Manchester, it means how can we make sure that our strategies reflect the expectations of today and society today, and recognising that we are in a digital first society. We've seen the pandemic be a catalyst for digital transformation. All services, majority of services are now online, public services are now online, and it's not going back. So actually what residents need in terms of those that simply didn't use technology before, and you can see some of those strands related to age groups, related to, we've got a focus around young people under 25, adults over 75 and disabled people, because we recognise those are target groups that recognise digital inclusion is one of their key priorities. But really, this is about essential skills for life. So everything from internet safety, how to be confident and safe online, to how do you switch on the computer, and how can you safely download apps, as well as people. So we've got initiatives around older people in local areas, really about how can people get face-to-face support if they don't want to use technology themselves. How can they get face-to-face support to do tasks such as access their online banking, such as fill out applications if they're being taken to court around benefits? The only way they can really challenge that is to fill out a form online. So your ability to live, your ability to have your rights as a resident, as a consumer, is really happening online. So those basic skills around everything from, as I said, using a computer, being able to understand how to keep your password safe, internet safety, it's a basic literacy for life. And actually it means for young people, it's their ability to continue further education. For residents, the links into health inequalities, your ability to understand and manage your health conditions, as well as access information online. So really there is longer term sustainable needs in order to join up around sectors. But it really depends on the delivery of it, depends on, you know, making sure that our solutions are based in communities and locally led.
And getting those skills to people who need them is incredibly important. Evie, how do you feel that we can sort of collectively best work to ensure that it's those people who are really struggling to gain those skills are having the opportunity to learn what they need?
Yeah, 100%. So I guess to your point about those shiny skills, the AI and blockchain, it's digital skills is this vast space, but the area where you have the most impact is the leveling up of individuals who can't participate in everyday tasks that we really do take for granted. And the stats that you said at the top of the call are very compelling, and they were part of our initial research and investigation when we were wanting to build a B2B program, a volunteering program. So for Virgin Media O2 Business in 2022, we launched our first our volunteering program that was based in digital skills. So it's called Connect More. And taking some of the credit here, because Rafi, who used to lead on the project, was spearheaded this brilliant program and did it in close collaboration with Greater Manchester Combined Authority as well. So Beena was involved in the pilot stages of this program. But in short, it essentially, we're trying to support a problem. The problem is the lack of digital skills, and the solution, well, we as a business, we all have 5 volunteering days to use every year, which is quite a lot in our sector. And as amazing as that is, you also want to create a strong program and incentive to get employees to volunteer, because when we're busy day to day, it can be, you know, can drop down the list. But actually having an engaging program like this, we've seen an uptick in volunteering. So it allows people to take a day or even half a day out of their working week to go into the local communities. These can be drop-in sessions, it could be in libraries, could be with Age UK. So vast, the different settings. And it's an opportunity to work with people that are actually in their community and to support them with those basic digital skills that can have a huge impact on their life. So it could be from things to learning how to just download WhatsApp to talk to their relatives, or it could be email, NHS app, you know, things that, yes, okay, you've got the sort of the administrative things like logging on to council services and all of that good stuff. But also, I think it is really important to realize that it's not just about the bills and all of that. It's staying in contact with your loved ones as well. So just giving that someone a lifeline to do that can be extremely transformative. So we've seen, since starting the program in 2022, we've grown it to, it started in Greater Manchester and we piloted it with the Withenshaw housing group, and Beena might be able to add a little bit to that pilot. And because it worked so well there, we're able to roll it out with other local authority customers. So we've rolled it out in Reading, Telford and Wrekin, London boroughs. So I've supported in my area, and also Coventry and Falkirk in Scotland. So because we have such a national footprint as an organisation, it's also a great opportunity to spread support far and wide. And it also, again, so it's not only is it supporting a problem that is prevalent throughout the UK, it's supports of employee engagement as well. So you do really get a sense of reward from doing it. And even from my experience, I thought I'd just share what it's like for me. So we've recently started working in an NHS capacity as well, because as we said, there's an inextricable link between health inequalities and digital exclusion. And so ensuring people have access to connectivity, but also to be able to do those skills like access the NHS app, is vital. So we've been partnering with some trusts to support with outpatient departments and all of that good stuff. And I supported, it was actually in an outpatient department, but it wasn't specifically for the NHS app. It was just where they were hosting one of their sessions. And there's a gentleman, John, and he was about 82, and he wanted me to help him verify his identity for Ryanair so that he could go to Morocco the next day. And the pressure, I was just like, that, you think, oh, I'm going to be fine. I'll know all my way around this. And I'm an iPhone user, and it was an Android. And so me and John were just like, we're in this together, John. It's not necessarily always easy, but actually the bonding as well that you have from that, and basically being honest and like, no, it isn't easy, is it? It is quite complicated. And I think these are just people that you're working with. And of course, John would rather be able to do that at home and not have to rely on others. But actually, there was something so lovely doing it together, figuring it out together, and then managed to sort it. And there's a big piece of Connect More. It's in the title that you're helping people get online, but you are connecting with your community and talking to people you might ordinarily not encounter. And it was actually just a lovely experience. So Connect More, we have big ambitions for it for 2024 as well. It started out as a B2B program, but we're looking to scale it up across the whole of Virgin Media O2. So it's one to look out for, I'd say, in terms of how we're going to keep supporting digital skills in the UK.
What a wonderful example, Evie. And Beena, it would be fantastic to hear about your experience of that from the other side.
Absolutely. And just in terms of the digital skills gap that we mentioned before, so digital exclusion, obviously a lot of people on this call will understand what the barriers are in terms of skills and motivation, affordability and access and connectivity, and the fact that there's demographic inequalities, but also place-based inequalities. So as a region, we really, our main focus is around joining up, around coordinating that support and response, but also making sure that we move towards long-term sustainable solutions. During the pandemic, understandably, everyone had to look at emergency solutions to addressing some of those barriers. But really, this is about, how can we come together with the learnings and move forward? So in terms of the skills gap, we've seen that with teachers. So the government and ourselves, we put together a Greater Manchester Technology Fund at the start of the pandemic for school children to continue their education beyond the classroom and connecting with schools. And obviously there's a link into not having the skills, but also the link into loneliness and well-being for particular people. But also that laptops were, with all the best intentions, there were laptops and connectivity packages to support schools, but actually teachers had laptops locked in cupboards because they didn't have the skills to switch on a computer and download software confidently. So there is a skills and confidence gap. In some communities there are motivational gaps as well. So the value of having that face-to-face support within communities, like the Connect More programme, is really incredibly, I suppose, underrated and probably misunderstood as a significant part of delivering locally embedded skills support in community spaces. In terms of us as a combined authority, social impact, social value is part of what we are tapping into in order to address digital inclusion. This is not something that's got a national strategy around it. It is not something that has been funded nationally. So in terms of what we have to do and our response as a region, it's recognising that digital inclusion is a challenge that we want to commit to. That's why we launched a digital inclusion strategy, but also a task force in order to join up. That's 250 organisations across the borough that join up around those barriers. So we very much, in terms of how we do this, we had a social local full fibre contract that was the biggest contract of its kind in the UK, and that is to support investment into infrastructure across Greater Manchester, connecting up 1,500 sites for 30 years, but also make sure we can support community hubs, etc. And as part of that contract, so Virgin Media was a partner for this, and as part of that contract, we work with Virgin Media on the social value delivery, and that goes beyond the Connect More programme, but actually more work around industry considering their role in supporting local authority and regional authority priorities. So what we got out of that social value was seconding into Greater Manchester's digital inclusion team, so my team, for 2.5 years. We had John Duncan here. That was really a catalyst into industry understanding what their role could be, with regional authorities understanding how can we work with industry to address some of their barriers. So we talk about barriers such as skills, but actually it's the delivery, it's the how that is a real significant problem. This is about reducing barriers and friction for people to participate, and the work of the Connect More programme. It is another way of how can industry play a role with tapping into volunteer days to better support people in places, and the work that Evie and colleagues have done around the NHS app. The Connect programme was piloted here to develop that broader national programme that has now been rolled out nationally, but it really kind of shows the impact that industry can have in addressing some of those gaps where we recognise that digital public services are not accessible for all. So really we have to catch up and use our levers in terms of supporting those priorities. And as Evie said, you know, the benefits aren't just, it's names, not numbers. So it isn't just supporting you know, thousands of people, but it's recognising that John needed this support, and actually what it made him feel is not just supported, but it made him feel like he could do things, and it made things possible for him in terms of understanding how can I do something online. We've seen residents in social housing that have been supported with volunteers supporting with price comparison sites and making sure that people in low incomes can maximise their household incomes. So actually the meaning of supporting people with essential skills, we have got responses around, it makes me feel like part of society. You know, it makes me feel like I can support my family more. It makes me feel, and this was someone who came out of prison who was managing his health conditions. He said, it makes me feel like a blade has been taken out of my shoulders. So actually, you know, there's a human element to all of this, and actually the role that Virgin Media has played. We've seen the conversations that we've had with industry at the start of the pandemic was really that kind of emergency solutions, and it was the first time that industry had to think differently around, you know, how can they support people better around those that live in poverty. And obviously we've got social tariffs that have come out, but actually you know, those conversations have moved on now into beyond social value, into responsible business, and we've certainly seen that with Virgin Media being a leaders in responsible business.
And some incredibly powerful examples there, Beena, just in terms of what this really means to people, and how actually it's often forgotten that there are these real human stories that sit behind, and the incredible sort of transformational power when people do feel digitally included. And moving on, So there's the skills part, but of course, if you don't have access to a device, you can't use those skills, even if you have the opportunity to learn them. A lot of what we do here at the DPA is helping to connect thousands of people to bits of basically old technology that is discarded, but actually can have a huge impact on families around the UK. But I know Virgin Media are doing even more than that, Evie. You're doing a lot to get devices into the hands of those who otherwise wouldn't have access.
Absolutely. So, yeah, to your point about responsible business, it's so significant now, and it's from a kind of employee retention and attraction perspective, it is important that businesses are operating responsibly. Anyway, it's what you should be doing, but also there's something extremely compelling in it, and for us, it's very important that we had a strong ESG strategy when we combined Virgin Media O2 back in 2021. And we launched the new strategy early 2022. And we had some big targets, ambitious targets around supporting digital inclusion. And that was from an access to devices, data, and skills perspective. And from the piece around access to devices and data, there's a couple of different ways that, and I think there's a point here that it's just, there's not one solution. There's multiple solutions going on at once. There's so many organizations trying to play their part and really support digital inclusion. So for us, we partnered with Good Things Foundations, their key strategic charity partner for us, as well as Hubbub, which is an environmental digital inclusion charity too. And they both have their own, I guess, recycle and redistribution programs to support digital inclusion with devices and data. So our role in all of that is making sure that they have, the funding to support that as well, but also connecting and I guess evangelizing what they're doing so people are aware of it. Again, I think a big piece of so much of this, and it's what DPA are doing, is the awareness. The amount of times I hear, I didn't know it could do that. You just think, I just want, we don't want to make sure everyone knows what they can have access to and how they can get their hands on it. So the couple of schemes in play, so community calling. So that started actually in the pandemic as an O2 initiative. It was a response to the fact, as we said, COVID-19 was so eye-opening to those that were online and those that weren't, as we all had to stay indoors. And so as part of that, we established a community calling program with Hubbub, and that basically encouraged consumers like you and I to look in your drawers, dig out those old iPhones or Androids that were all guilty of harboring, and posting them to Hubbub so that they could work with their verified recycling partners. Instead of sending anything to the crusher, they'd refurbish them and they'd put them back into the hands of those that very much needed them. So the initial goal for that was 10,000 devices. And then by May last year, we hit 15,000. So we've just kept going with it. We've kept supporting Hubbub. And on the one hand, it's obviously a shame that you have to keep doing it because there's such a need. But actually, it's great that the more that you support it, the more sustainable it's becoming, and the model's been able to scale. And scaling things like I guess recycling program, you need supply. And so, I guess call to actions are, from a consumer perspective, check your drawers if you do have iPhones or anything in there. There's plenty of ways that you can make sure that they can be repurposed. And so I'm sure at the end of this, we can send out more information about things that exist in that regard. So there's the consumer perspective, but also we do encourage businesses as well to think about how can they get their employees to do just that, but also how can they as a business, when they've got device refreshes coming up, or they know there's a lot of legacy tech, what are they doing with that tech? A lot of businesses will have contracts in that space, but I can guarantee not many of them will be focused on, okay, those contracts will be designed, we'll refurbish as many as we can and we'll put them back into the community. So now there are lots of programs that exist like that. So the Good Things Foundation, with whom we founded the National Data Bank, which is, we've not touched upon it, but as part of when we combined with O2, when Virgin Media combined with O2, we started the National Data Bank with the Good Things Foundation, and we put think it was more than 60 million gigs of free data into that. And now Vodafone are involved, 3 are involved. So it's such a great example of cross-sector collaboration to support, a significant issue. And so there's the National Data Bank. So that's free data for those that are struggling financially. And there's a few parameters to access it. But as you can tell, 60 million gigs of data is quite a lot of data. And so it's our aim is to get that into the hands of those that need it. But there's also the National Device Bank, slightly newer, but the Good Things Foundation basically look to work with businesses, big and small, but big corporations, local authorities, to basically ask them, what are you doing with your old tech, or when is your refresh coming up? Would you consider, and this is all completely free of charge as well, but working with them to put all that old tech back to the Good Things Foundation. They work with their partner economy, and it's all extremely certified up to their eyeballs in terms of what happens to those devices, in terms of the way that they're cleaned and data stripped, and you can get certifications off the back of it. It's all super secure. And then with those devices, they go into the device bank, and it works just like the data bank. So if you're part of, in order to get access to devices and data through the data bank, you have to be part of what's called the Digital Inclusion Online Network, which is what the Good Things Foundation run. And this is just such a good example of providing holistic support in digital inclusion. And they've been able to develop this model with industry. And I think a big theme of this call and, what we're talking about is it's not just down to one sector. The private sector won't have all the answers, or the third sector or public sector, but working together, you can develop some really cool and sustainable solutions that will have impact. So I think the National Device Bank's a really good example of seeing how businesses can do their bit to, put that old stock into good use. And also, community calling, which is more of a consumer focus. If you do have devices lying around, just think, okay, it won't take much of your time, but that phone could really change someone's life. So there's a couple of different initiatives that we support.
Thank you, Evie. And Beena, I know that you're doing a huge amount in Manchester. I think I saw that Manchester has now been crowned, if that's the right word, potentially the most digitally inclusive city in the UK. How are you doing that?
Well, so Manchester is one of our 10 local authority boroughs. What we did as a region was pulling together all of the 10 boroughs, because we recognise that in order to achieve our regional ambitions, we really have to pull together. And for the first time, and this was just during the pandemic, when local authorities were setting up community hubs, and we were asking them what were we seeing and hearing on the ground. And what we recognised was, whilst the government was supporting people that were medically vulnerable, there was another layer of vulnerability that came through, and that was, people needing devices, people that were unable to connect, children unable to schools asking local authorities for help because they needed devices for the young people. So we brought together a local authority group, all of our 10 leads together, and we meet on a monthly basis. And for the first time, we saw boroughs that were very much kind of understandably looking after, so Manchester looking after their own residents and focus around, how are they supporting their own residents, Stockport looking at how are they supporting their residents and their community response. But actually, for the first time, local authorities were looking beyond themselves about how they can come together around shared challenges. There's always going to be a need for devices, there's always going to be a need for connectivity, in particular for people that cannot afford. Poverty is a real contributor as well as an outcome to digital exclusion. And in terms of the data bank that Evie touched upon, so in Greater Manchester, this is about taking up the offers that already exists, and we recognise that we're not trying to duplicate what already exists. Digital exclusion initiatives have been happening for decades, or digital inclusion initiatives have been happening for decades, but this is really about how are we learning from them, how are we joining up in terms of those initiatives, and making sure that we can look at scalability, well, if it's useful, if it's relevant, as well as utilising what's already there. So the National Data Bank with the Good Things Foundation, we partnered with them to create a Greater Manchester Data Bank, which is a Greater Manchester campaign, and get all of our community centres, food banks, libraries to join up and sign up as data banks, because we recognise that there is a stigma attached to a need. Local libraries and community spaces will know when some of their residents or people that come to them are struggling and they need some additional support. So this is free data for everyone. In terms of what I mentioned earlier, so internet service providers pre-pandemic, it was the first time they had to, or post-pandemic, they had to think about alternative ways to support people that lived in low incomes or faced other challenges, and that included everything from making sure that they were more flexible within contracts, that their contracts were accessible for people, as well as the affordable contracts and some flexibility in them to make sure that people that were living kind of paycheck to paycheck could be supported rather than incurring that ongoing debt. And we're seeing this exacerbated with the cost of living crisis in terms of people's ability and actually having to choose between food, fuel and connectivity as a basic utility. So within the first year, and this just tells you, within the first year of launching our Greater Manchester Data Bank, we had over 23,000 residents that had benefited from that free connectivity. So whilst there are offers already in place around social tariffs, etc., this tells you the depth of the issue. So back to Evie's point, and I'll just quickly kind of touch upon them. There's a circular economy here when it comes to addressing those challenges with access to devices, access to appropriate devices, and recognising that they differ. So the benefits, and we've seen this with our Greater Manchester Technology Fund, it's not just about purchasing, reaching out for people to donate so we can purchase new devices. How can we maximise what is already in place in terms of utilising the strengths of public sector, of industry, to contribute their old devices and be refurbished locally. So we work a lot with, so in each of our local authority boroughs, they have developed partnerships with local recycling partners in order to make sure that people can drop a device nearby in their local area, and it's easy for them to do so, and then they can work with a local refurbishment organisation in order to use that device. And there are device lending libraries that are in each of the local authority areas. There are multiple ways to support the need for devices, and that's the point here. I know there's lots of local authorities on the call doing fantastic things. I speak to a lot of local authorities that say, I'm at the start of the journey. But actually, I say you're not at the start of the journey because you best understand the needs of your residents, and there's already things in place that you can tap into in order to address some of those needs.
Thank you, Beena. That is fantastic and great to hear that you're scaling that up around individuals being able to donate devices as well. And something that we're just kicking off in London, working with one of the London local authorities to be able to accept those machines. And it's such a possibility for the millions of people around the country who just don't have access to those devices to get all those phones and tablets and laptops out of cupboards and drawers and be able to give them to people where actually that is going to make such a massive difference, potentially to a child or a family going forward. And I know that actually sort of one of the key themes we're almost getting to here is partnership working, to be honest. It's about bringing together industry, local government and charities, which is all at the heart actually of what the DPA looks to do. And Beena, I think you've actually had some fantastic experience in how public and private sectors really can work together to solve this problem. How would you frame that? How could other local authorities look to almost replicate there what you've had such success with?
So thanks, Elizabeth. I think I mentioned the framework of which we work. So joining up all of our 10 local authority areas I had individual conversations with organisations, whether they're national organisations, local organisations or global organisations that wanted to support, Greater Manchester's response in some way. But actually, at that point, we didn't quite know what the needs were. We just knew that people needed devices, we were getting called upon left, right and centre. Teachers couldn't download the software, librarians couldn't support people that came to them because they didn't have the skills themselves. There's a lot of emergent needs that come through. So the framework of working is working with our local authorities, because actually no one better knows their residents than local communities and local authorities. And those local authorities face niche needs. And obviously we know that local authorities are strapped, and there's an increased pressure on local authorities to be able to deliver lots of different priorities, and digital inclusion is one of those that could fall within gaps of, we've seen this before the pandemic, digital inclusion fell within the gaps of IT teams or digital transformation teams. And we look at digital exclusion as social exclusion. So it really didn't capture that bigger picture of recognising how can we address these widening barriers within the cost of living crisis. Those barriers are just getting further, further away from really being able to put sustainable solutions in and frameworks to support those emerging needs. So we also brought together and coordinated all of the organisations, industry, communities, schools, local authorities in a Greater Manchester task force. We've now got 250 organisations which have a national or global or local footprint that want to, and this is about convening anyone who has got a focus around digital inclusion. And again, this is about sharing resources, sharing learnings, but also connecting up opportunities, because there's a lot of strengths here in terms of what organisations are doing, in terms of how can we match make those needs, how can they work together. So really this is about joining up, being a coalition to really kind of be a catalyst to address this. And we've seen, I can see in the chat, we've got Stockport on board and some of our 10 local authorities, and it's really been a catalyst for local authorities within Greater Manchester to be able to make sure that not only digital inclusion is part of their local strategy, but they have a specific focus around addressing digital inequalities, and it is part of their cross-policy aims. So there's a lot that we are doing to join up in terms of policy areas, but also there's a lot that we can do, and has been a real catalyst with working in partnership with industry. And actually the example of Virgin Media's Connect More programme, and how we have created opportunities to pilot programmes with industry here that can then be scaled. It is really about making sure that, with the best intentions, businesses or organisations have got the best intentions in terms of supporting people and bringing together solutions, but without testing those solutions with all the best intentions, they wouldn't necessarily be fit for purpose. And really the best way to test them is making sure that we co-design some of those solutions in community spaces with communities and local authorities to better understand not just the what, but also the how things need to be put in place. And it's about enhancing what already exists rather than duplication.
Hopefully some inspiring words there for some of our local authority colleagues who are listening in. And GMCA is just absolutely phenomenal in terms of everything you're achieving there. And Evie, looking at sort of the role that tech suppliers can play in tackling digital exclusion and coming to this sort of from that industry side, what do you feel that industry can be doing even more to help end digital poverty?
Yeah, so I guess I alluded to it a little bit. So you've got your, what is the business doing, or what are you doing already? So I talked about our ESG strategy. So it's called the Better Connections Plan. So most businesses now feel like sustainability is a core pillar of how they operate and how they do business. And it's also important to shareholders. So I guess it's that putting your money where your mouth is. And for us, that Better Connections Plan is integral to how we operate. So with that, those commitments we have to deliver them. We put them in black and white. They're in our, our financial reporting now. So that's a big way to make sure that you actually are, it's not tokenism. It's about having a serious impact, because historically CSR, corporate social responsibility, is like, well, it's a nice to have, but now it's no, this is how you should operate. You have a responsibility. If you operate in a community, you need to give back and you need to support it. So those commitments that we have there. So for example, by 2025, we said that we would connect at least 1 million people, get them online for those who are digitally excluded. We're making really good progress with that target. So we published our latest sustainability report last June, and we'll be doing it again this year. So you can kind of see the progress we're making against that and the levers that we're pulling to support that. So to Beena's point, it isn't about reinventing the wheel. It's about investing and supporting people in organizations that know what they're doing, know where the need is, know how to do it, but a business can provide resource and capital and that extra marketing support as well, because I think that's a huge piece. Awareness is significant. So it's using our channels, it's using our O2 stores to promote Data Bank, which I don't think I mentioned, but as of December last year, every O2 store in the UK high street operates as a data bank as well. So it's just pooling resources together and making sure that business is really having the impact it can have with the resources available to it. So that's the kind of, I guess, ESG strategy. But my role in social value, I kind of see social value as a vehicle for local impact. So the sort of ESG program we have, all these goals, it's all across the UK, which is amazing. But when I'm working with the likes of GMCA back when, because Beena and I met in 2020, I think it was like lockdown day one.
Many moons ago, it feels.
Yeah, many moons ago. And it was all these commitments that we had for Greater Manchester. And we did rework some of them because things that were relevant when we were bidding for an opportunity weren't necessarily where the need was. We didn't foresee a pandemic 3 months later. So we worked so collaboratively with GMCA and were flexible around the commitments we put in to make sure that what we were offering was having an impact. Because it can be so easy for businesses to sign a blank check and and hope for the best, but instead we were like, no, what can we do that's actually going to have an impact? So social value with Greater Manchester really set a blueprint for how we deliver social value, and that collaborative piece, listening to your customer and then therefore listening to their communities. Because again, to Beena's point, nobody knows a community like a local authority and those community organizations. They're their customers. So we have a responsibility to make sure we're listening to our customers' needs. So social value is an amazing tool, or I guess lever to pull for public sector organizations looking to drive impact in a particular area. It's not about, you can't change the world in one day, but you can change the world for someone. And I like your point about saying it's names, not numbers. And it's so powerful because you want to have all this impact. It's like just supporting 10 individuals is amazing, because that's 10 lives. So I guess my recommendation would be the Social Value Act's there for a reason. Make sure that you're considering it in your procurement exercises. Try not to be so high level, because if you ask high level questions, you'll get high level back. If you really want to have an impact around digital inclusion, see what you can get out of your tech suppliers, because they'll be willing to help, and they can really drive value when working together. So yeah, don't forget the social value.
Oh, I feel like Beena wants to come back in on that.
Well, I just wanted to say, Evie makes some really important points, and there's something here around authenticity, and how businesses, as Evie said, again, social value might have been seen as a tick box around what they need to do in order to get a contract. And again, it's a lever that they might get a contract on, because, public sector might see this is what they are committed to. But actually, you know, as we move forward, this is about, you know, for us as a combined authority, as an authority, it's about, you know, how can our strategy work for people? How is it relevant in today's age? And that's where the authenticity also comes in, but also working with industry in order to make sure that their social value impacts and beyond, their responsible business impacts, can support actual needs where they are identified, and work with us to do that identifying. The role of local authorities or regional authorities, so we can provide the mechanisms. So for our example, in Greater Manchester, our mechanisms are the local authority digital inclusion leads meeting, that platform to make sure that whatever's being bought can be shared across those 10 local authorities. We can provide the mechanisms of the Greater Manchester Task Force. And by the way, that's open to anyone. So we've got other local authorities beyond Greater Manchester that have joined because they learn a lot from that sharing. And again, it's an opportunity for organisations like Virgin Media to share what they're doing on a broader scale and for people to tap into. The other mechanism that we have is around a digital champions network, and that is to address a skills gap, but also to use industry around their levers, so tech skills, essential tech skills, volunteer support, potentially finances. And I think Evie mentioned, you know, what she got out of the Connect More programme. So actually there's more that we can do, and levers that we have that industry do not have, levers that industry have that we do not have, and again levers that community groups have, that social housing has, that local GP surgeries have. So again, you know, what we can do individually is very limited, or limited within the boundaries of our levers, but actually what we can do together is far much more.
Thank you. And actually, I think that's a perfect point to move on to Q&A, because actually it is about pulling those levers, and what we can achieve together is so much greater than the sum of its parts. We only have a few minutes left, and we pride ourselves on finishing our webinars on time, so we will be doing that. But I would just love to ask a couple of the questions that we've had coming through. One of those is how we can use digital inclusion as a bridge to support stronger communities rather than the end point in itself. And it'd be fascinating to hear from either of you whether there's any examples of how digital inclusion has been the springboard that gets community members out there making the change in their neighbourhoods. Beena, I don't know if you'd maybe like to go first.
So again, we've got Stockport's here on the call, so I'll give an example from Stockport. So there's an organisation, a community organisation called Starting Point, and they're part of the Stockport digital inclusion delivery. The Starting Point was a coffee shop that was based in an area which was on an estate in Stockport, an area of high deprivation, and they were a coffee shop that people from all walks of life would come to during the day, and just as a place to connect, a neutral place to connect or see a friendly face. And actually what they found were people were coming to them with their problems, like I need to go on an app to make a GP appointment, I need to access my prescriptions and I'm told this is how I've got to do it, I don't know how to use my phone, and you know, other questions like I need to access my bank account and I have to go online to do that, bank has closed down, so how can I do that? So what they recognized was a need, and so they started running sessions in the evenings and also in the day to digital kind of how-to sessions. So it wasn't about tech specifically, but it was just about tasks, and that in itself worked because it helped people to do things in ways that they might not have had the motivation to. But what it also built was community. And those places are so significant for community, because actually we've seen with the Levelling Up Department of Levelling Up, there is a real focus around strengthening places, but you can't strengthen places without strengthening communities. And each local authority has got distinct communities and have unique characteristics. So actually, in order to strengthen places, we need to make sure places work for everyone, and that everyone is included and do not feel like they're not part of the area in which they live. And one of the benefits from that is a chap who was not just lonely, he had lost his partner, his wife, and he was in his 80s, and he didn't have a purpose to, get up in the morning. His wife had done all the kind of household, financial priorities for them. She managed everything, and then he felt at a loss when she was gone. He didn't quite know how to manage, expenses and household utilities and things like that. So again, he felt lonely, he felt disconnected, and then someone said, well, join online this Zoom call, and it was his way to connect with another person. He did that every day. It gave him a reason to come out of his bed, and a purpose around, if there was one thing he was going to do, it was to join this call in the day. What he learned was basic skills like, how can I look at my favorite music videos on YouTube? How can I learn about things that I used to love? It gave him a reason and a purpose, and could see his value and could find the things that mattered to him. And actually what he then went on to do was get excited about what he learned, and he ended up becoming a digital volunteer to support other people, peers, in terms of how they can get online. So actually there is more than just about supporting individuals. You're supporting families, you're supporting communities, and actually that goes far beyond the digital exclusion being a destination, or digital inclusion being a destination. It's about more than that. It's about how we build bridges of social inclusion and economic inclusion beyond digital and tech.
And what an absolutely wonderful story and case study in itself, Beena. I'm going to draw us to a close here, because I respect everybody's time, and thank you to the panelists for joining us today, and thank you to all of our fantastic attendees coming along as well. I do want to do particularly a shout out to Evie in representing Virgin Media O2 Business, who are of course one of our fantastic industry forum supporters, and we're incredibly grateful for all of the support and resource that they share with the Digital Poverty Alliance, and more importantly what that allows us to do in terms of advocating for change, advocating for government support around this, but also being able to deliver real help to real families. And every device that we give out, much as Beena was saying, we give a device to a child, but actually it has a massive impact on the entire family, on the entire household. If you are sitting and thinking we should be part of that industry forum, please do get in touch. You can visit digitalpovertyalliance.org and you can find out there how you can support us that way, or you can drop me an email on elizabeth@digitalpovertyalliance.org. If you would like to join Beena in our local authority network, where we also do a huge amount to really start to grow some of the awareness between local authorities of some of the levers that they can pull and some of the resources that are out there, again, please do just get in touch with us. We'd love to have as many local authorities as possible join that network. And I will in a minute just drop a link in the chat to our national delivery plan, which we released last year for the first time, following on from our evidence review. And we are going to be iterating with NDP 2.0, very much a working title, in June later on this year. But I'm going to give the final word to our two panelists. Closing thoughts, Beena and then Evie.
I think the closing thoughts are, you've seen the passion in the room, you can see the passion in the chat, and that, what I've said earlier, individually we can only do so much, and we've got limitations as regional authorities, as local authorities, as industry does. But actually what we've learnt especially around the past 3 years and going forward, is we've got to move forward with the learnings, but we can only do more together.
Cool. And I guess from me, it's, yeah, don't forget about Social Value Act, put it into your public procurement if you are a public sector organisation, but also even if you're a charity, private sector organisations always looking to partner with the third sector to support that delivery of social value on the ground. So yeah, if you want to get in touch with me as well, we can drop a link to our new social value webpage that we've just launched too. But thank you so much, Elizabeth, for letting me in. Yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you to everyone who's watched, and this will be online later if you want to catch up on any of the points you missed. Thanks a lot.
Thanks
Take care,
so much.
everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.